Good evening and welcome. It's time for another edition, year 3 of Down to the Wire, Candace. We started a couple of years with Noble Moon, and who would have thought 2 years later we'd still be on the air?
Oh man, Noble Moon memories. He still races, sort of.
Yeah, a lot of those guys are still racing. But anyways, it is season number 3 of Down to the Wire, capping with Candace, joining us again. And this week we're going to kick it off right away with our traditional Jerome Stakes. We're also going to take a look at the Mucho Man Stakes at Mucho Macho Man Stakes at Gulfstream Park, and then we're going to talk about some off-the-track topics which don't necessarily relate to this week, but they do kind of apply to 3-year-olds and things that we're going to be looking forward to in the next couple of months. So first off, the big A, the Jerome Stakes. It looks like the weather could be pretty nice.
It does. I mean, this race is always kind of an interesting one because it seems like we get a little bit of a mix of horses dropping out of some of the leading 2-year-old stakes. It's weird to call these horses 3-year-olds now. But the leading 2-year-old stakes, and then combined with some of these more kind of lightly raced types who maybe have just won their maiden or maybe have only ran once or twice. And so I always like this race because you get that little bit of a mesh, and for a lot of times these horses are maybe stepping up their first time to a mile, first time, at a little bit more of an extended distance. So this is always kind of gets the excitement going, gets us excited for the Kentucky Derby Trail. For me, well, for one, this is interesting because there's a few contenders in here who might run on New Year's Day, which is the day before this race. So depending on where Condo King and King Crans go, obviously that would dramatically affect this race, I think, from a quality standpoint. But for me, I'm rolling the dice. But will totally regret saying this, I'm sure, but I'm taking a horse who's been running at Parks. I know, crazy. But this Bird of Trey has just been steamrolling horses over there. And that's what I'm going off of, the margins of victory, not necessarily the speed figures, because we do, seem to see speed figures from Parks kind of astronomically high compared to some other places at times, but I mean, I think he deserves every sort of a chance in this kind of a race. He's by Birdstone, so the step up to a mile should be something that he should enjoy more than anything, not just handle it. And I mean, he's done very little wrong. All he's doing is just crushing horses over a park. So I think, supposing that one or both of Condo King and King Crans don't run here, I think Bird of Trey is at least an interesting horse in this race.
Yeah, I looked at this race and kind of handicapped it with what I saw in the Daily Racing Form. They're pretty much reporting that it looks like King Condo is going to go in the Jerome, and or King Crans will go in the Lost in the Fog Stakes, and then Condo King will go in the Jerome Stakes.
Okay.
So it looks like there's going to be any one of 4 or 5 horses either capable of taking the lead or going for the lead. I mean, I think you could make a case for Donegal Moon. Bird of Trey has shown speed, or at least pressing speed.
Flexibility is fast.
Flexibility is fast, but he hasn't been on the lead per se, but he's been right there.
Yes.
Condo King, but he's been facing maiden. So I think that's kind of the key to the race. I don't think they're going to get real fast fractions. I took a long look at Donegal Moon, and then I kind of went with Condo King. But then at the end of the day, I'm just thinking maybe the class drop. I'm going to give Flexibility a shot here and just take him on the class drop. But I do think it's going to be interesting, and I do think a lot of people are going to watch him because if he wins, I think naturally Mohe Men's stock is going to go up.
Right.
But if he loses, some people are going to question that for him.
Right, and I don't even know if that's necessarily fair. I mean, yeah, he was second to Mohamed twice, but I don't think he was really going to win either of those races, and I don't know. I couldn't have him here. He could absolutely win the race, definitely, but you have to think people are going to sit there, see Mohamed, and he's going to be bet off the board. So I think it's very interesting, like how you say, if he does lose here, people, I think, might knock Mohamed, and that probably isn't fair.
So is there anybody else that you're not necessarily picking in this race that you're going to keep an eye on, or what's kind of the key to the race? What intrigues you about the Jerome?
I think for me, the horse who I would be looking at is Donegal Moon. I can't bet him in here, but he is a horse who has gotten a lot of hype. not even necessarily as some kind of precocious horse. He's by Malibu Moon out of a Giant's Causeway mare. But I think he has been touted all along as a horse who they said, they really expected. Maybe he'd want a little bit further. He's cutting back for the Milan to a mile here, which even if he might ultimately want further, I think that cutback suits him for right now. Um, but he's just one of these horses that it seems like every expert seems to like. And I haven't quite seen what they all like about him. And this is kind of, this is his sixth start now. I think I'm at the point where him would like make it or break it. Show me why you're good.
Yeah, I'm not so sure he has a lot of upside, although I think he is capable of winning this race or being in contention. The key to me is because of all of these pace pressures and who's going to get the lead. I think flexibility may try to come off the pace a little bit. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I guess that's what I'm looking for, because if he proves that maybe he can come from 3-4 lengths off, that makes him a little bit more dangerous down the road in the withers in the wood.
Yeah, and I wonder if pace-wise this will be a race too, and we see it so often, especially at this time of year, because we talk about the juvenile races, how they're all speedballs, for the most part. The good ones. They go to the front, they win, that's it. At this point now, people are trying to teach kind of the patience in these horses, and sometimes in a race like this, you think there's a lot of speed, then all of a sudden nobody goes to the lead, and somebody gets a soft lead and goes on with it. And so, again, we talk about it every year at this time of the year. Don't just watch the winner, but watch, the progression versatility wise with some of these horses. Does a horse do something they've never done before? That's notable.
The Jerome Stakes will be run first on Saturday, and then now let's go to Gulfstream. The Mucho Macho Man Stakes, the Breeders' Cup Classic winner from a few years back. He was always one of my favorite horses. He was another horse that kind of, before Twitter really hit the masses, people love like Juba and they like Dortmund. Like Mucho Macho Man was born in May, and he was just this huge leggy horse. Like I think he would have gotten a lot of Twitter play back in the day. But kind of nice race that Gulfstream is named here, and I think a lot of people were expecting one of the nominated horses, Zulu, to enter this race. He did not enter the Hutchinson or this race, so I think I got a really evenly matched field.
I think so, and I think for a lot of people, unless you bet racing in Florida, as if that's the tracks you follow, I think for a national audience at least, that these are horses that maybe aside from fellowship are new to most people, which that's always a good thing. And we broaden our knowledge on this crop as a whole, especially because you think several of these will go forward into the Fountain of Youth and those sorts of races. Um, I say Fellowship is the one that people, I would guess, probably know. He's ran the most times. He won a stakes a few races back now, routing, coming from far out of it, and that's really his style. But it's that style that's worrisome to me. He's been racing at Calder. He comes back now to Gulfstream. Yes, he's won here, but we also know how Gulfstream's been playing lately, and it's back to its old conveyor belt self that everyone knows and probably doesn't love. So I'm a little worried about him with the way the track's been playing, and I'm worried about that style in a small field. Sometimes in small fields, horses with that sort of a style are forced to run faster than normal early in order to stay in touch. We saw that with Honor Code when he ran in his little made-up race after his injury at Gulfstream. It was a 5-horse field, and he really had to be pushed early in order to keep in touch, and then he was smoked. So I'm worried about Fellowship here. I do think he's very vulnerable in this spot, and he's another that even if he does win this, and if he wins it, you better believe he'll be the type of horse people will jump all over because it would be a stylish win coming from the back. I don't see the upside. He's ran so many times. He's by far the most exposed of these horses, so I don't want him in the race, and I definitely don't want him going out of the race even if he wins. For me, the horse I instead would be looking at is Awesome Speed. I'm really intrigued by this horse. He's won his last 2 races after being trounced 5.5 furlongs at Parks, but his last 2 races I thought he's run extremely well. He can go forward, but he doesn't necessarily need to be on the lead. And from what I see, this distance shouldn't be a problem, even though he's stepping up from 6 furlongs. It shouldn't be an issue for him to get this mile. I don't know maybe how much further than that he wants, but a mile should be no problem. He's taken enough money in all of his starts, so I'm going to go with a little bit more unexposed type and Awesome Speed in this race.
Yeah, I came 3 or 4 horses that I really started looking at. Awesome Speed I considered. One thing I noticed that with Awesome Speed the last time, he kind of went to the front, and people may wonder why he did that. The track that day at Laurel really favored front runners. So he kind of had to do what he had to do to win the race. I don't think that means he's a front runner per se. I think he could go back to that stalking trip that he had 2 back. So I don't think he needs the lead. I ended up going with Aggressive Driver. I like this trainer. A lot of people may not be familiar with him, but he dominates the Gulfstream Park West scene. And he had a couple of expensive juvenile purchases last year. This one's only a $50,000 purchase. But the sire First Dude was another one of those looker horses. He was a big, long horse and trained by Dale Romans. He had about 120 foals in his first crop. This is his first crop. I think he's going to have some runners. I like the fact that he gets J.R. Velasquez. And the last race he showed speed and won by 3. And sometimes those Gulfstream Park West horses, just by the fact he's been in Florida the whole summer and whatever, he may just have a little bit of local edge or whatever you want to call it.
Perhaps, and you brought up First Dude. I know at the sales last year, First Dude, he got a rousing reception from people at the sales that, loving the look of his horses and thinking that, a lot of them will be horses who really do want to route. So, an interesting prospect for him very early in his stallion career.
Anybody else or anything of note of this race that you're going to keep an eye on?
I think for me, I already said it with Fellowship. Don't want him here. Don't want him coming out of here.
That's a look at our previews this week. Now we're going to go off the track where we talk some of the key 3-year-old horses and preps and hidden gems, and later on will be future wagers and things like that. But this week we have a couple of topics. The first one I wanted to talk about was Nyquist. And Nyquist, I think, is an interesting horse to talk about because a lot of people in the know are kind of writing him off as a 10-furlong horse. But I think that he's kind of getting underrated for what he actually did accomplish, which is go 5 for 5, win 2 Grade 1s, and win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile out of the 13-hole while running practically almost 60, 70 more feet more than anybody else. So I think Nyquist is a good horse. And then we talked about this before, just because he may not win the Kentucky Derby doesn't mean he can't win the Florida Derby and any other prep that he runs in.
Oh, exactly. And that's, I think, is the key to him is, if you look at him like I do, and then I don't think he stays 10 furlongs, that doesn't mean he's going to not be a player all the way up to that point. They've already laid out their path for him. They said San Vicente, they've said Florida Derby. With the bonus in play, you think Florida Derby is a huge target for him. I think 9 furlongs is possible. I mean, 1 at 8.5 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So he's a horse who, as far as Derby aspirations go, I'm probably down on him, but you cannot write him off now. And as you say, I think people are underrating what he's done, and he's accomplished quite a bit. Even more so than, Breeders' Cup win was nice in that he really showed a lot of versatility as far as running style is concerned. He showed some toughness, some grit, but even his front runner, I liked that race. I picked Swipe in there, and I liked Nyquist coming out of that race. I just thought he was real gritty. He was tough. He had to earn that win, and he did. And we look at races like that in the moment, and we said, well, Swipe is the one to take out of it. He's the one to have going forward. And while I still believe that when we get up to 10 furlongs, there's something to be said about a horse who could basically run as bad as they possibly could and still win. And I think that's what Nyquist did in the front runner.
And he had a fast 7 furlong win, so we know he's fast.
Yes, definitely. And like I said, there's plenty of, even if he ultimately is not a Derby horse, he's not a bad horse. And there's plenty of races for him out there. You suspect he goes to the Derby, yes, but going on for there, who's to say he can't win the Preakness? Or who's to say he can't win, some of these, the Jim Dandy or the Haskell, exactly.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of my point, is I think people are saying, oh, well, once he loses the Derby, we'll never hear from him again. And I could see him pulling off 2, 3 major wins in 9 furlong races.
Oh, absolutely. And you have to, again, look at the pedigree. People are so into stallions and such, but he's by Uncle Mo, who's, he's young, it's his first crop. So I don't think they're in any hurry to kind of shelve these horses. They want these horses to go out and make a big statement right out of the gate for a young stallion who's getting a lot of support. So if he could go out there and win a Jim Dandy, win a Travers or a Haskell or whatnot, I mean, that's a big statement, not just for him, but also for his sire.
So my second topic this week is a maiden special weight race run at Gulfstream Park last Saturday. And it was kind of an interesting race because it was a mile and there was a couple of horses with some nice pedigrees. So I purposely made time to watch them warm up and watch the race. And one thing I noticed about Gulfstream on Saturday, there was 5 dirt races, and all 5 of the dirt races, jockeys were sending their horses out of the gate. So I just kind of wrote that down as a note as I was watching replays. Then I noticed a horse went wire to wire, I believe it was in the 4th race, and the final time was 107.94. And I'm just like, this time has to be wrong because he went wire to wire and he was kind of dominant in the race. So then I watched the 8th race, and there was co-favorites, Wheels Up Now and Rally Cry.
Oh.
And
I watched this race.
And Rally Cry had ran second to a couple of nice horses in his first debut race. He was actually 3-5 and lost, but he made a mid-race move, and he came down the Gulfstream. And Wheels Up Now had faced a couple of good horses in his 2 races. So I think people kind of knew there was going to be a nice race.
I have a future wager on Wheels Up Now. Start the strat to Jerome right now.
Yep. So anyways, all of a sudden I noticed the fractions live during the race. And I'm like, 22.39, 44.61, 109.60, 122.83 for 7, and the final time of 136.88. And it just, I'm like, how could they go? Like, I'm like, wow, either Rally Cry and Wheels Up Now are 2
They're the best horses in America.
They're 2 of the top 20 horses in America, and they're both running in a maiden race at Gulfstream. Or what's up with this time? So then I kind of went away from it, and I noticed that later on that night, your boy, Bruno De Giulio, the clocker, he tweeted out that he had video timed the race in 137.97. And the official Trackist time was 136.88. So I downloaded the video and I got it in 137.95, a little faster than Bruno. But anyway, so I looked up I have my Picking Winners book here. And so if you go by the Trackist time, the official time of the race, unadjusted Beyer, it's going to be a 91. If you go by the video clocking time, hand time by Bruno, it's going to be an 81. Now, they adjusted the track as being fast that day, Beyer did. So they actually gave him a 79. Okay? But if you believe the video time, it's a 68. The reason why I think this is
great to awful very quickly.
So the reason why I think this is important is because Rally Cry is trained by Todd Pletcher, and I would say there's a 90% chance he goes straight into the Holy Bull to face Mohe Men in his next race. So there's going to be a lot of money wagered, and we saw this last weekend with Run Happy. Like, sometimes you don't have to bet the horse with the highest speed figure, but when a horse has a 15 to 20 point higher speed figure, like, they usually don't lose. So Mohe Men has a 94. And if you think he's got a 79 or a 68, it's going to really affect the race. So I think this just brings up, you know, Craig Milkowski's always talked about from Timeform US on we shouldn't have any run-ups. That way it would make it more consistent. But like, that's a full second, and a full second on the Beyer chart at a mile, on a 2-turn mile, is 10 speed points. So I don't know which way to go. I mean, I really don't. I just know there were some well-bred horses, and I think they both came out of key races. So my gut instinct is probably a 79, but what if it is that 68?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a big difference. And Gulfstream in particular, I know as far as timing goes, is notorious for being way up, especially at this mile distance. So it is difficult in races like this, especially with these younger types that you don't have a lot to go off of. It's not like an older horse where you can look in there and spot a blip in their, their typical mark that they run to. This is horses who are progressing for the most part. They're winning these kinds of races, and you don't have enough to go off on. So you don't even know, like you say, you don't know if he might be as good as Mohamed on the speed figures, or he might be uncompetitive. That's a massive difference.
Well, the interesting thing is so that was the 8th race on Saturday. The first race on Sunday was a maiden claiming 35,000. The 6 furlong split was 112-2. That was a 2-year-old maiden claimer. Today at Gulfstream, they had 2 1-mile races. One of them was 110-4 by an allowance filly who was favored, who won by 6. The other one was a maiden special weight filly who was favored, who won by a couple, but ran a 111-2.
Yeah.
So 111-2, 112-2, 110-4, and then you have Wheels Up Now running a 109-3. Your future wager may not be dead yet if that's for real.
Yes.
So
put him into, at this rate, just throw him in. Throw him into the Holy Bull as a maiden. Do it.
So I do think it's interesting, and that's where I'm skeptical, because you've got other favorites in a very similar class level running anywhere from 2 to 3 seconds slower. And I know track surfaces change, but a 109.3 you don't see very often at Gulfstream going a mile.
No, and I mean, I think like you're saying, you kind of have to interpret for yourself and what you see off the race. And to some extent, sometimes we'll see speed figures that are really high, and people will say, well, look how inflated that is. That can't be that good. But if you see one that's really low, too, I mean, this was, what, a 14-horse field? I know it's a very large field. Do you really believe that 14 horses, some of which, as you say, come out of key races, several of which were Breadville, do you really think 14 horses ran that bad?
No. So, I mean, I'm leaning towards the 79. Here's what I'm leaning. I think something had to do with the run-up. I do think the 109.3 is wrong. I just don't think that could be possible.
No. No.
So if you give it like a 110.1, that puts it kind of right around 137.3, and that, then that's about where it should be. But like I say, there really is no answer. That's why I bring it up. But like, ultimately we'll know in the next race if Rally Cry runs really well. We'll say that the 79 is pretty legit. If he gets beat by 20, we may start to question. We may think maybe that 68 was closer to being correct.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it casts another light on timing issues in general and how much of a problem it really is becoming with, we have all the simulcast racing. People are betting races all over the country now, and, these speed figures, well, they should be transferable from race to race. When you're having flat timing issues, then it's not going to be, because you just said it's impossible for them to know what is accurate and what isn't accurate. I mean, even though we have Trackus, I know there's been issues even with that, with not always having splits or not always having the times for a specific horse, or, sometimes the little monitors they put to get the time, the jockey will take it off, or so it's not foolproof either. So it's really, really tough. And I know you guys talked about it on Twitter, you and Craig Milkowski and the likes. And I mean, I saw some of that, and even like he was saying something like on the turf track at Gulfstream the other day, they changed the rails 3 times in a single day. Like, how do you even keep up with that? Like, you hear about it, the rails getting changed once in a day maybe, but 3 times? That's got to be impossible to keep up with.
Well, especially when a lot of dollars are wagered based on speed figures. So that's the crux of the matter.
Well, especially with a horse like this, like you say, it's a Pletcher trained horse. If he comes in there with a high figure, Pletcher, people are going to bet it like it can't lose.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was more confident that it was a 68, because my angle would be to bet against him, but I'm not that confident. That's the problem. I don't know which way it leans. I'm leaning from experience that it's probably a 79. But part of me pauses and be like, wow, if I could, if it really was a 68, that changes the whole thing.
This is money to be made now.
Yeah, maybe you could rule them out for second or third and find some other horses. So that's my off the track topic. Now, you wanted to talk about your off the track subject here this week.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I wanted to just go back to a topic we've mentioned this time of year, the last couple years, with we always look at this sort of trail in sections, and I think especially last year we saw these were really distinct divisions around the country, the California group, the Midwest group, New York and Florida, and there wasn't a lot of shifting between the groups, and you kept seeing the same form hold in each group. It seems the last couple of years the strength has been in California. We also had California Chrome from over there. Last year we had Dortmund, Firing Line, American Pharoah was their first juvenile year, went out to Oakland, then after that. But I mean, what do we see? We saw California had the best juveniles this year. Do we think they're all going to stay in California, or do we think maybe all the strength out there is going to boost races like a Sunland Derby, or maybe someone go to Arkansas? I mean, what do you foresee happening on that front?
Well, I think the perceived power in the West Coast is Nyquist is your champion.
Mm-hmm.
Rallis won a major stakes out on the East Coast. Exaggerator won the Delta Jackpot. And Swipe confirmed his form running second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, defeating, holding that form with Nyquist. So I think a lot of people are that, and then you add in more Spirit, who ran third at Keeneland and then came back and won the Los Al Futurity.
Well,
so
I think even Baffert, right, doesn't he have a few maidens who maybe lost first time and then came back and won by like 10?
So yeah, I think things can change quickly. What's interesting is that Nyquist ultimate prep could be the Florida Derby because he's eligible for $1 million bonus.
Yes.
So you're already going to see one horse move track. Baffert, will send one of his to Oakland, if not two of them. Sunland and some of these races are carded differently this year because the Derby's later this year on May 7th.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting the Florida Derby, and the Spiral now is on April 2nd, and the Louisiana Derby's on March 26th. So maybe just the way the races are spaced this year could cause more horses to move around.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what I'm missing, and I don't know if maybe you've followed more closely or see something out of it, I think what I'm missing is the strength in Louisiana. That the last couple of years we've seemed to have a couple nice horses come up through fairgrounds in that circuit, and I don't see a lot of, who I would consider stronger, logical contenders that would be coming through there at this point. I wonder if maybe that's a spot that's going to be ripe for the taking for somebody.
Well, the early bird nominations came out for the Louisiana Futurity today, Louisiana Derby, and all of the main players that you know about are nominated. But there's quite a group of unraced horses because there's such an early nomination.
Yeah.
But there's some nice well-bred horses. So I think, in the past, trainers like Chad Brown's gone down there. I think one of the strengths of Steve Asmussen is he not only has the stock, he can find races. So I think he's got 2 or 3 nice winners, maiden winners that I have on some short lists. And so I think he's going to put one at Oakland and one at the fairgrounds. I don't know which is, I think he's got 4 nice horses, and 2 will go to the fairgrounds and 2 will point to Oakland, I think.
Well, I suppose fairgrounds, when we see every year, maybe a couple horses from Florida will head over. It seems like those late closing horses from Florida who perhaps can't get it done over Gulfstream, which can favor speed, have had some success going to Louisiana as well.
Interesting to note on the Louisiana Derby nominations, both Moy Hay Men and Annual Report were not nominated. So right away, McLaughlin's kind of just saying we're staying. He's not. I mean, last year he nominated every horse to Eric. Frosty was nominated to the Santa Monica Derby. Like he nominated everybody to everything. And remember, he ran that turf horse down at the fairgrounds.
Yes.
And so that's interesting. But otherwise, and I noticed there was really no Baffert horses nominated. So, granted, you can always supplement, and it's a fee. So, I mean, maybe I'm reading way too much into it. But they're not early bird nominating them.
Yeah, and I think his string in particular, as the years go by, it's really going to be interesting. The spots that they pick, he seems to be getting a lot more now of these very well-bred Godolphin, Shadwell, expensive type horses, and so then they're always going to be going for where's the grade 1.
That's going to do it for our first edition of season 3 of Down to the Wire. We've got the Jerome Stakes and the Mucho Macho Man Stakes. Next week, we're going to take a look for sure on the Sham Stakes, which will be at Santa Anita. And we'll see what else shapes up as we start to roll on the road to the Triple Crown. That's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.